But we all just sat there eating this silly potato. They'd throw in a potato, and it was sort of to be a treat at the end of playing the softball and that. And then everybody would take out, well, the men would take out these potatoes, and we'd just sit there and eat like the inside of the potato.
So it's kind of like now when we play soccer at the leagues, and then we have orange slices.
That's right.
You had potatoes.
We had an all burnt potato.
Are they charred?
Yes, black. I tell you, it was weird.
For this Sunday Night's Endangered story, I want to do something a little bit different. Something to commemorate yesterday, which was Remembrance Day. So instead of showing just one interview, I wanted to show a compilation of interviews, excerpts from interviews where those who I interviewed spoke about their parents who were vets. You see, here in Pointe Claire, we have a lot of, I guess, one of my interviewees called themselves Army brats. We had a lot of those because here in Pointe Claire, we had the Veterans Land Act in 1946, which brought in many, many vets into a portion of Pointe Claire, specifically Lakeside Heights. So we have a lot of these stories. So here's just a few of those from those who grew up in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, whose parents served in the First and Second World War. Enjoy.
So you explained that. Now, it's a Veterans Land Act.
That's right.
Which meant that veterans bought the homes.
That's right.
That it's a good chance that they were all roughly around the same age, with all kids around this.
They were all the same age. They were all.
So just explain this to me. Who else was buying these homes?
They were all Army, Navy, Air Force. They some of them would never talk about it. They were a very close knit community. And to the fact that after the workmen finished on a lot of these houses, they left behind like construction shacks. And a whole lot of the men got together and they sort of altered them and rebuilt them. And we used it at the time like as a legion, was behind, you know. And we'd go there as children and they'd have little parties or show little not movies like you see today, but little movies on something that they had, some projector, you know. And that was the beginning, really, of a community center up there.
Which would have been where today?
It would have been right behind, what is it, Sagan? No. Yeah, right behind, right behind there. Same part of the land, but right behind there before it was built. Yeah, and it was just a big park after. They built like a big park. And they used to have tombolas and all kinds of things there, you know. And the men themselves, like, they'd have like a softball game, just to pick up. And as children, we'd all go, play with the men, and we'd go down there. And after supper, rush down to start in the outfield and work up. And at the end, they'd build a big bonfire, and we'd put in a potato, because it was a great big thing to put a potato in. And don't ask me how we knew whose black potato it was when it came out. But we all just sat there eating this silly potato, you know.
What do you mean? You'd make a big fire and then
they'd throw in a potato, and it was sort of to be a treat at the end of playing the softball and that. And then everybody would take out, well, the men would take out these potatoes, and we'd just sit there and eat like the inside of the potato.
So it's kind of like now when we play soccer at the leagues, and then we have orange slices.
That's right.
You had potatoes.
We had an all burnt potato.
Are they charred?
Yes, black. I tell you, it was weird. It was a funny time, and
it must have been a sight to behold. This massive. Tell me about what do you remember about that?
I just remember it being built, and it was everybody standing watching it, and it was just such a really almost like an occasion, if you want to know it. And I forgot this too, but when the street lights came in, and I can't remember exactly when they were, one ended up at the end of our driveway. And my father was so mad because in shift work he'd sleep and it would shine in his bedroom window. So one day he took his gun, he sat on the front veranda, and he shot out the light. He shot the light out.
I guess he had a good shot.
Oh, he did.
I guess he has some good friends up at City Hall.
I
too.
don't know. I remember him running into the house. And I don't recall anything ever happening to him, so he must have pretended it wasn't him. Yeah, it did get replaced, but he was just so angry that one night when he came home tired, I guess, you know. And yeah, it was ridiculous.
And your parents weren't brought up in Point Claire like some of the people I've spoken to?
No, my parents were born in England. I'm not sure when they came to Canada, but they were young. And then when my dad went off to war, they were living in Verdun. And when he was overseas, my mother and I lived with my grandmother in Verdun. And then when he came back from overseas, we moved to Point Claire in 1946.
So your mother and your father both immigrated when they were
From
kids?
England.
When they were like separately. So your mother was called a war bride? Did she refer to
No, she
herself
was
as
here
a-
before the war.
She was
They
here-
were married during the war. They got married and they had a reception at the old Point Claire Hotel, which became Euston's and Clyde's and whatever else it was called in the time from Chegnier's. And they had a little reception at the Point Claire Yacht Club. And I believe a day or two later, my dad went back overseas.
What Chegnier's? You mentioned Chegnier's.
Well, that was Clyde's. It used to be the Point Claire Hotel, but everybody in Point Claire referred to it as Chegnier's because the owner was Mr. Chenier.
That's in the Point Claire Hotel days.
Yeah,
Okay. So when your father was at war,
I was a baby.
you were still in Verdun, or you had
Yeah, I
already
was
moved?
born in '43, and he was overseas, and I don't know exactly when he came home. And then when the war ended, '45, I think it was over, that he came back, and we stayed. I think we had an apartment somewhere on Lakeshore Road in Lachine near the old fire station, near Broadway Avenue. And I think we were very young, so I don't have much memory of it. But I know we stayed in that area because now it's a beautiful big park in Lachine.
Yeah.
And my mom, when we would go to Lachine Hospital and that, she'd say, well, that's where we were when you were a baby, you know?
And then
Because I was only 3 when we moved to Point
yeah.
Claire.
But you wouldn't remember anyways because you're just not into that stuff.
No, but I was only 3, you know? My memory now is no good. How about when I was 3?
So then I'm guessing that your parents made the decision that they wanted to have a single family home and some land. And
Well, it was also the Department of Veterans Affairs, like the Lakeside Heights development where I grew up was called the DVA development. And the prices were, I think my dad's property with the house and everything was maybe $3,400 with a half acre of property.
Yeah.
And when you figure today on St. Louis, the people with the half acre properties are splitting them and selling the split for $500,000. That was a pretty good deal to buy it then.
It was the Veterans Land Act.
The Veterans Land Act. Yeah.
Low interest rates, I
Yeah,
think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think his mortgage was something like $37 a month.
and so was it exclusive or was it
You
just
had to have served.
to buy a plot in that area?
Yeah, in that area, which is St. Louis. Well, now it's called Maywood, but it was St. Louis, St. John's, Duke of Kent, Brador, and the section of Broadview between Brador and St. Louis was called the Salaberry.
What, the road?
Yeah, it was called the Salaberry because the development never went north of Brador. Brador was the borderline. Behind that was stone hedges for the farmers' fields.
You're saying Broadview?
Broadview
that little
between
Broadview strip.
Broadview between St. Louis and Brador.
Did it not go right down into
Going north.
the tracks?
Going north. Going north.
Yeah, but
St. Louis to Brador going north.
But
St. Louis to the railway tracks was Broadview.
how come it didn't keep the name?
Well, they named everything. Everything in that development had something to do with the war.
Oh, so did they change the name? Or
No, it
or
was
they
called the
just,
Salaberry originally.
But what if the Salaberry was referenced?
Maybe it's reference to a ship like Jarvis Bay, Dieppe, Duke of Kent,
Yeah.
St. Louis. You know,
I thought I looked one up and it had a reference of World War One.
it's very possible, but
Yeah.
everything had reference to war. Everything was referenced in some way to war.
This might be a little off topic, but I'm just curious if you have the answer to this. Do you think that the vets who came to move into the area appreciated that, or because when I speak to your generation, a lot of your generation don't know much about the war because their parents didn't want to talk about it, and here they are living on street names that are named after aspects of the war.
Well, I think some of the guys that I grew up with, their parents talked more than others. My dad didn't talk much about the war. He was in the Navy, and he saw some ships go down, including his best buddy, who my middle name is named after. There was 2 brothers that went down, the Stevensons, and Carmen and Ernie Stevenson. One was on the St. Croix, and one was on the, I cannot remember the name of the other ship, but the St. Croix got hit, and the other ship, which they were not supposed to do, but they went to rescue them, and then they got hit. So they both went down. But no, maybe when they had Saturday night parties at the old clubhouse and that, they talked about it. But amongst the kids, no. And even when we were in school, other than Remembrance Day, there was very little reference from teachers or whatever to the war era. Because don't forget, not everybody moved there in 1946, 47, 48, 49. And then 51, Korea hits, and Korea ended, I think, in 53. So when Korea ended, my mother was from a family of 10, and she had 3 brothers that came back from Korea that lived with us for a little while on St. Louis. So they talked more about Korea, but they were, a different era than 41, 42.
So these would be the it's
Korean
close
War
enough to be
vets.
the younger brothers of the World War II vets.
Well,
It's not a different
well,
generation.
no, there was two of her 5 brothers served in the Second World War plus Korea.
Would they be the same? Some of the same who were still in the military.
Yeah, they were still in the. There was 2 of them were career military people.
Wow.
Yeah, the other ones left the military, I guess, sometime in the 50s after they came back.
Wow.
Yeah.
In Karen's interview, she mentioned that, and I'm not sure if it's the same as the clubhouse in the park, but she said that what happened was the builders who were building all the homes had a shack that was where they kept all their tools and everything, and then when construction was done, they left, tools left, shack stayed.
That was our tar paper shack. That's where Santa Claus used to come. Yeah,
Where was that shack?
right where, basically where the clubhouse is today.
So was that the first incarnation of?
Yeah. That would have been in the, I was when 6, it would have been late 40s, and then the little clubhouse was built before the extension, and a large part of that money came from the McDonald Tobacco, the Stewart family. The little hall in there still bears the name Stewart Hall from the foundation. And I don't know if you saw the Cub pictures or something, but you might still see a picture of, the McDonald Tobacco lady that has a skirt on the kilt.
Yeah.
It was hanging on the wall for years and years and years. I don't know if it's in any of the
Seems
pictures.
like a man cave type of piece of decoration.
Yeah. So, well, no, the Legion was not there until just in the last 10 years. So it hasn't been there all that long.
So, where were you born?
Born right there, 99 Cedar Avenue.
And when did your parents came to play?
They came to Canada from England, went straight to Toronto, and about early 40s, they moved to Cedar Avenue. They bought that place in Cedar Avenue, and we stayed there I stayed there all my married life. My father died very early, but as I say, we used that place. My mother did during the war, after the war. It must have been after the war, say 45, 46, and we used to have the soldiers come in school buses to our property, and my mother would serve tea and cookies. She was British. Tea and cookies. I remember that I would have probably been 5 or 6, and I'd see the soldiers with no legs and soldiers in wheelchairs, and it was a hospital from St. Anne de Bellevue. Remember
Yeah.
So they would come in buses to our place. I don't know, a couple of times.
What was the connection?
Well, nothing. It's just a sort of volunteer thing that people did in those days to help the wounded soldiers from the war. So, and we had a big property, And I used to have a goat and rabbits and all kinds of stuff. It was a big problem. You could do that sort of thing then, but and
bylaws, I guess, for
they were very. We didn't know about bylaws, but it was a very nice community. And if you go up that street now, I know that 105 is gone. 99 is still there where I was, in 91. So we were 3 big properties in a row, and we were the only ones that had all the soldiers, because we had the biggest, I think it's an acre of land, which is a lot. And I think I don't think they sold any of it.
He used to go with the president of the company. You've seen these buildings called with Bell on it, so that the president wouldn't have to look at maps and stuff to try and find these, because in these places they had generators, and he would inspect these, because if they go down, the telephone system goes down. And to make a long story short, my father walked right through Europe. He was an overage soldier, so I don't even think he wore a uniform. But they took us down to Gaspé, and he was trained, and he walked right through Europe, and he would tell the underground or contact the underground not to hit these things, so that when the army came in, they would connect to them and have a telephone system. And he went right through Europe and got the military medal, and never carried a gun, never got a scratch. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't hear a lot about these guys. They don't make movies about these guys.
He won the military medal, the highest medal you could win without getting killed.
Yeah, there's some reason that the stories we hear, they don't like to romanticize the ones who were running the whole operation. We hear about the infantry, just infantry.
They took the whole family to Gaspé, and when he was in Gaspé, he ran the cable, because that's what he was, a cable man, across the St. Lawrence to stop the submarines from coming in. That's what he did that job. Yeah, because I had an uncle that ran a tugboat. So if somebody broke down in the St. Lawrence River, they would go in like a tow truck and tow them in. They went out one night and never came back. A German submarine must have come up, taken their food and oil. And, they were so far from home, and they disappeared from the face of the earth. Yeah. In fact, my cousin just died, which would be his son. He was a captain of one of these tugboats, you see, and never came back. Went up to retrieve a ship, never saw him again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, John Rennie's high school was a memorial to my father, basically. Yeah. You could look at it that way.
In my personal opinion, I don't feel like there's enough of a commemorative sort of display, not only for your father, but just John Rennie's legacy in general. Like there's the Terry Fox thing, there's a few things. So
Well, I must admit, until you told me about what's been happening at the government, I have that oil painting. If you want to hold on a second, I can unpack it and show it to you.
Yeah.
But just a second. This was painted by Vadim Dobrolich in a displaced persons camp in Eidenau, Germany in 1946. Dobrolich moved to Edmonton in 1948, became a painter of some renown in Canada, and now the collection of his works is at the University of Alberta in the Cool Center for Ukrainian Folk Art. And some of the paintings that I have, I gave to them, but not this one.
And he's what, 43 here or something? 43-ish?
He would have been 43.
I'm 43. Wow.
Well, that's what he was, a major in the Canadian, the Black Watch Royal Canadian Highland Regiment, seconded to the British Army of the Rhine. And this would have been not long before the incident that gave him the heart attack. That's what war will do to you.
Wow. And have you ever had the painting?
I've had it repaired. It had some damage.
Yeah, like the
So it has
varnish,
been-
the not the varnish, the what do you call it? The sealant that they put on top of the paint, how it yellows out over time.
Well, it's oil, but the canvas is very thin. This was done in a displaced person camp after all.
I don't understand that. I guess he made a request and someone went out and got a canvas and paints.
No. Mr. Dobrowicz was a painter. He was in the camp. He was 33, I think. He was born in 1913. He was in the camp. He was a landscape and still life painter. My father was good to the people in the camp. He made friends. I have a Ukrainian embroidered table runner. I have a box carved, and inside of it, it says, and this is back when he was a captain, Captain Rennie, Eidenau, Germany, 1940 something or other. He was well respected. He was a good man. He made sure that the children, he had my mother buying Christmas presents and sending them for the children for Christmas parties where he was working, whether it was at the officers' mess or the camps or wherever. You know, he made sure that he did what he could for those people. Hated the Germans.
So you said how long was he in that position for the displacement camp?
It's hard to tell from his war letters, but probably at least a year.
Wow. And
Well, the war ended in June of 1945, right?
Yeah.
And he died, he had his heart attack in June of 1946.
And he was
may
in the
have-
service for 3 years.
He was in the service before he went overseas. But he went overseas in the fall of 44. And he traveled around in France, especially in the Netherlands, doing things for the military, whatever he was doing. He wasn't a foot soldier, like I said. And I'm not quite sure when. I'd have to dig out his letters to see if there's any indication when he ended up in that post. But it would have been towards the end of, maybe it was towards the end of the war, sometime in 1945. I would
Yeah,
think.
because they usually send Canadians to clean up.
Yeah. Well, he was, as I said, he was seconded to the BAOR, the British Army of the Rhine.
Wow. Imagine, we just did 2 years of a pandemic and we had a hard time with that. And it's so nothing.
They don't make us like they used to.
No. Listen, I always tell people, I said, listen, I know it was hard on people, but I was still giving my kids avocados in their lunches in the middle of the whole thing. Like our grocery stores were still filled with strawberry in the dead of winter in Montreal.
Yeah.
I could still buy every colored apple you can think of, and strawberries and avocados and grapes. So we were still
Can you
fed
ima-
very well, you know?
I mean, you know, when you think about the rationing, you know, and all of that. I mean, my parents, my father, my father's sister and younger brother, my stepfather, who was born in 1914 and lost his father somewhere in France in 1916. And my mother was born in they came out of high school in 1929, 1930, 1931.
During the Depression. So finding
Yeah.
work was difficult.
Yeah. And then they went to war.
And then they went to war.
I mean, I was brought up by people who my stepfather marched in Armistice Day. He didn't have these two fingers on his right hand.
How did he tell people where to go?
With his left hand, I suppose. But you know, they marched in the Remembrance Days parades. We spent our afternoons of November 11th at the Legion. We were off school. Our church was right next to the cenotaph in Huntington. And you'd go out there and you'd stand in the freezing whatever and you listened to the ceremonies and you sang the anthems and you did all that. And you knew these people and they'd all fought. My stepfather never talked about how he was shot.
Yeah.
My father, would have told my mother that story about the Russians. He couldn't have written it in a letter. The censors would have got it. He was very careful what he put in his letters.